Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Johnson and I am going to be talking to you today about number expression errors. I'm using the PowerPoint that comes with your textbook to describe the rules that you're going to need to know for number expressions. So let's get started. The first rule that I want to express is that you should spell out numbers 1 through 10 when you're writing, and numbers 11 and higher can be written as numerals. And in the case that we have here on the screen, we have three alternatives. That's the first example. Notice that the word 3 is written out, and that's because it falls between 1 and 10. The second example is in July, 15 days were rainy. 15 is stated as a numeral because it's more than 10. In the third example, for the sake of consistency, because one of the numbers in that sentence of related items, all school supplies, is over 10, the 15 is over 10, then we're going to express 2 and 1 also as numerals because we don't want to confuse the reader by writing out some of the numbers and expressing others in numerals. So we have bring 2 pencils, 1 calculator, and 15 sheets of paper. And remember, if it didn't have the 15 sheets of paper here, and it was just bring 2 pencils and 1 calculator, we would write out 2 TWO and 1 ONE. But because we have the 15 included in the sentence as well, we're going to show them all as numerals. I have one more example here on the bottom that I typed out for you, and it's to show you that there are some cases where we don't use numbers when there's one number bigger, and that's when the one of the numbers is not related. It's not a related item. So let me just try to explain here. We traveled in a caravan for 4 days. Note that I have written 4 out because it falls between 1 and 10. And then stopped to buy 4 loaves of bread and 12 jars of peanut butter. Because 4 loaves of bread and 12 jars of peanut butter are related items. These are groceries we're purchasing. We're going to use 4 as a number because 12 would be shown as a number. So to be consistent with the related items, we say 4 loaves of bread, 12 jars of peanut butter. But 4 days is not a grocery item. So we would go ahead and write that out. And notice they're all in the same sentence. I hope there's no confusion here. Let's move to slide 3. So spell out numbers that begin a sentence, even if figures are used later in the same sentence. In this example, they're saying 32 students, and because 32 is the beginning of the sentence, we're going to write it out. We wouldn't start a sentence with a number like 32 numerals. We have to write it out. Students in a class of 45 have passing grades. So there doesn't have to be confusion there. It's just understood that if a number falls in the beginning of the sentence, we're going to write it out. Now, when you have a really large number and it gets awkward where you have to write something like 21,000 students, you don't want to start a sentence that way. It is a little confusing. It's better to show the 21,000 as a number. So what we would do in that case is simply rearrange the sentence so that 21,000 would not be the first word. So we would say a total of 21,000 students applied for admission. That's better. All right, let's go to slide 4. So we have a couple of different things to look at here. Spell out approximate amounts in isolated fractions. Okay, so when they say spell out approximate amounts, the term approximate is the key word here. So approximate. So if we look down here, we'll say approximately 30 students attended the presentation. Now 30 is higher than 1 through 10. So typically we would write numbers for 30, 30. And we would do that if the word approximately was not in front of it. When we're talking about approximate numbers, we go ahead and spell them out. It's a crazy rule, but it is a rule. So in the second case, mixed numbers are expressed as figures. Now, you might be confused about, well, what is a mixed number? I think it was probably second or third grade when I learned that, so it's been a really long time and I hardly remember. But in a case where a whole number, like 1, is added to or expressed with a fraction, which is a different type of number, then we call that mixed numbers. A whole number with a fraction would be mixed numbers. Mixed numbers are expressed as numerals, figures. Okay? Use a hyphen to join the numerator and denominator of a fraction written in words. So if we didn't have a mixed number, if this is not 1 and a half, it's just 1/2. So we write it out with a hyphen. All right, let's go to slide 5. Numbers as words. So as we look at it, we'll say spell out street numbers through 10, 1 through 10, as ordinals. So I figured a lot of people might not understand the term ordinal, so I made a little note down here in the bottom of the screen. So when you see first, see the ST there, second, ND, third, RD, 10th, TH, these numbers are being expressed as ordinals, and these little ST, ND, RD, those are typically referred to as ordinal indicators. So what it's saying is spell out street numbers through 10 as ordinals. So if we have something like she lives at 1007 10th Street, we wouldn't say it this way. We wouldn't say 1007 10 10th Street. There is the possibility for confusion when we write something that way. Suppose someone doesn't space adequately and it just looks like that. That would confuse the mailman and it would confuse people along the way. So we say that we put the address of the house, the name of the house, or the street number as a number, and then we say 10th Street as the name rather than 10th Street. And then in this case, use figures for house and building numbers except number 1. So in this case, we said 1007. That's the house number. However, in this case, the party will take place at 1 Redwood Drive. We wouldn't put a 1, a number there. We're going to spell it out. And that's just a rule. I don't have a good reason for it. It's just a rule. When it's 1, we just write it out. Let's go to number 6. So, our slide 6, it's rule 5. Spell out ages 10 and under. So we're following that same rule of 1 through 10, spell it out. Unless someone is including months and days with it. You know, some parents will say, oh, my child is, 4 months and 10 days old. So in this case, it's my granddaughter's 4 years old. So because it's through 1 through 10, we go ahead and write 4. But if I say my grandson is 2 years, 4 months, and 21 days, now I'm using numbers to describe, figures to describe those numbers, because it's not just one thing. If I just said he's 2, I would say my grandson is 2 TWO years old, just like we did here. If it's over 10, and we're not including months and days and so on, we just say my brother's 21. That's over 10. Okay? All right, let's go to slide 7, rule 6. When two numbers are used together, spell out one of the two, preferably the one that's shortest. This is to avoid confusion for the reader. They drank 6 2-liter sodas. That might look confusing if you wrote they drank 6 and used the number 6, 2-liter sodas, because then it could be interpreted as they drank 62-liter sodas. So this avoids confusion by separating the numbers, by writing one out and expressing the other. In this case, both are 3 letters long. So 6, this is just a choice. The person who wrote this chose to write out 6 instead of 2 liter. Okay, they could have put 6 and then wrote out 2 liter, TWO. It wouldn't make any difference. In the second case, she had 2 24 exposure rolls of film. They could have written 2 as 2, only 2 is 1 through 10. We're going to kind of follow that number. Okay, let's go to the 8th slide. Now this is sort of a little quiz. And if I had it in the slideshow mode, you wouldn't be able to see any of these answers. But because I just have it in a display mode, we're going to go through them together. Choose the correct number form. So I have 17 apples. Would I write 17 or 17? It's more than 10, so I'm using the number. Blank swimmers have qualified. Well, we don't start a sentence with numbers. We would have to write it out. The class is blank Hispanic, 1/4. So we wouldn't show that wouldn't show that fraction as a number unless it was a mixed number, like 1 1/4. So we write it out with a hyphen between 1 1/4. Drive to blank Tudor Road. Well, 1 through 10, that's the rule. So we're going to express, unfortunately, that's the rule, but we're going to express it as a 2 in this case. Remember, if it was 1 Tudor Road, we would write O-N-E. But because it's 2, higher than 1, anything except 1 would be expressed as a number. So 2 is how we go with that. He just turned blank, 16 or 16. It's more than 10, so we say the number 16. Give me blank 12-foot boards. If I put 10 12-foot boards, it could be confused as 1012. So I'm going to put 10 and write it out, 10 12-foot boards. All right, so let's move to slide 9, rule 7. Use figures to express time when used alone or with the contraction o'clock. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what they're talking about alone. The word alone, some of you may interpret it differently, but I don't know what they mean by used alone. I do know what they mean by o'clock. So use figures to express time when used with the contraction o'clock. So you would say, I'm alone or with the contraction o'clock. Well, they're saying dinner will begin at 6 o'clock, so they're writing it out, which kind of goes against what they're saying here. Use AM and PM with figures. You do use figures with AM and PM, and this is the way it's done. Dinner will be at 6 o'clock. It's not 6, the figure. It's written out. So this is wrong. You're not going to use a figure when you're using a contraction. Okay, so let's move to slide 10. Rule 8. Use figures without adding these ordinals, ND, ST, or TH, after the month to express the day and year. And this is a tricky thing which a lot of students get confused about. Express the day in ordinal figures when the day precedes the month, and that's true. So we can't say, I'll be at the party on June 10th and put a TH after the 10. We would say, we'll just use these examples we have here. D-Day was June 6, 1944. We don't say June 6 with the TH there. We can say it. We don't write it that way. She will pay the bill on June 9. Now we would probably say June 9th with the TH on the end. We would not write the TH. Taxes are due on the 10th of June. Now in this case, notice that the number of the day becomes before the month. So when you say the day before the month, you can include the ordinal indicator. If you say the day after the month, June 9, you cannot include the ordinal indicator. The 1st is a Tuesday. It's understood that the 1st is of something. We don't have to say the 1st of June or the 1st of August. We can just say the 1st. The month is understood, and because it comes before the month, we can say the ordinal. We can write the ordinal version of the number using the ST or the ND or the TH, etc. All right, rule number 9. Express figures, dimensions, measurements, and weights. So, express in figures this way. We're going to say Elizabeth weighed 7 pounds at birth. Now, even though 7 comes before, is in the 1 through 10, we wouldn't write out 7 when we're talking about a figure, a dimension, a measurement, or a weight. All these rules, right? Dimensions, measurements, weights. Now we're going to always talk about figures. The room was 14 by 20 feet. Now, you would probably write it this way anyway because both are over 10. But even if it was 6 and 8, we would say the room was 6 by 8 feet. And we would put numbers there, not spell it out. Okay, because we're talking about dimensions. Rule 10, express in figures the street numbers over 10 and all address numbers except 1. And this sounds like a little bit of a repeat of what we talked about before. She lives at 545, numbers, North 12th Street. It's over 10. He lives at 3 North Main Street. Street numbers above 10 may be expressed as either cardinal numbers or ordinal numbers. So you could go with 12th or 12. And in this case, he lives at 3 North Main Street. All right, let's go to Rule 11. Express as figures numbers following nouns when they're related to that noun, like chapter or rule or policy. Okay, so you can find the description on page 4 in chapter 1. So even though page 4, F-O-U-R, comes between 1 and 10, because it has a noun that's related to it, page is related to it, and chapter is related to 1. Policy 6 deals with absenteeism. So again, we've got a noun that's related to the number. So it's almost like the name of the number. And when we say that, we have to use it as a figure. Okay. Rule 12. Express in figures amounts of money or decimals or percentages and interest periods that include the year, month, and day. Spell out the word cents for amounts that are less than $1. The examples they're giving here is an average of 25.5 incidents took place each year. 25.5, and that's because we're talking about a decimal. It's a little bit weird because earlier they said when you're dealing with approximates, and I think average would be like an approximate, then you would have to write it out. But you would only write it out if it was a whole number, not a decimal. Current mortgage rates are 5%. I want you to notice here that they're not using a percent symbol here. You always write the word out. When it's the word percent, you write it out unless you're dealing with a column of numbers or you're dealing with a spreadsheet. So don't be using the percent sign in your formal business correspondence writing. Business letters, reports, and such. No percent signs unless it's in a column. The current mortgage rates for 5%, we just did that. So the item was worth 25 cents at the most. And this is where we go with this, 25 cents if it's less than $1. I wanted to give you some more examples in number usage with regard to money or interest. So money that was deposited before May 1, remember we're not going to say May 1st. We could have said May 1st if we said first before the 1st of May. Then we could use the ordinal. But in the way we've written it here, 1 cannot have the ordinal after it. Will earn 6, the number, it's 1 through 10, but we're still using it as a number because we're expressing percents or interest. Both in this case, 6% interest. And again, remember, I'm not using the percentage sign here. The cost for admission is $14. I'm not putting 14.00 because when we're dealing with a whole number, we don't use the 0.00 unless we have to be consistent with other numbers. If I were including maybe bulleted items of this costs 14 and this costs $3.99 and this costs $2.50. Because I'm using 0.99 and $2.50, I would also put 00 with the 14. But in this case, when it stands alone and there are no cents, we don't use cents. We don't say 0.00. The late penalty will be $49.99. In this case, we do include the 0.99 because it's not 00. Now, if you were using these in a list of numbers, it would need to be consistent all the way down. Okay? All right, another quiz. And again, if I were in the display mode or the show mode, then these would be popping up for us one at a time, but they're not. So come at 4 o'clock. So it's asking you, would you express this as 4 o'clock, a number, or 4? And the answer is 4. And it's not because it's 1 through 10. It's because it's o'clock followed by o'clock. So you're going to write out the time if it's followed by o'clock. Okay? Even if it's 12. 12 o'clock would be TWELVE, not 1, 2. We move in on the blank. 7th or 7th? 7th. The TV weighs blank pounds. In this case, 10 can be expressed as 10 because we're talking about a measurement, a dimension, a weight, and so we can use a number instead of writing it out. He lives at 555 blank street. He lives at 555 13th Street. I would go back and look at the rule there for addresses. In my mind, if we say 555 13th Street and we put the 13 there, it could make it look like something completely different. I'm more inclined to think that 13th is going to be the correct answer there. Rule blank covers false starts. Rule 3. And the reason we can say 3 even though it's 1 through 10, is remember there's a noun that is going along with that number. So rule 3 or page 3 or policy 3, we would say the number, write the number as a numeral or figure rather than spelling it out. If I had only 50 cents to my name, now we've seen 50 cents expressed this way lots in our lifetime. In a normal business correspondence, like a letter or report, we're going to write it out as 50 cents right here. Okay, let's go to the last slide here, and it's dealing with zip codes. And there's a little more information here as well, but all letters and envelopes should include the correct 2-letter state abbreviation and 9-digit zip code. Now this is a good sentence all in its own. We're using TWO, 2-letter, because it's 1 through 10, and it's a hyphenated word, so we're going to spell it out. And then 9-digit, again, we're dealing with 1 through 10, and so 9-digit, that's also a hyphenation. Zip code. The U.S. Postal Service requests that the address should be single-spaced, capital letters, no punctuation. So in case you didn't know this, this is how the post office would like to see all addresses that they have to deliver. They have specialized machinery that read the addresses, and they're really good. They can actually read the handwritten addresses as well, even when we don't do it correctly. But the fastest way, and a way to not get your letter rejected and held up for a day, is to make sure your address is written this way or typed out like this. And notice that the zip code is one space from Illinois. And notice that Illinois is also IL, not spelled out as Illinois. You would spell it out as Illinois in a letter, but not in an address on the outside of the letter. And then 62918, and then notice that there's a hyphen, 5134. That's all of the zip code numbers. That concludes this video. I know it's long. I'm sorry that it's long, but I have gone through all the rules that you will be looking at in your textbook, and hopefully something I've said will clear something up for you that you might not have been able to get just from reading the textbook alone. All right, I hope you all have a great day. See you later.